Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries, an organization that exists to connect the Christian faith with the nitty-gritty realities of everyday life. As always, I'm Scott Jones, your host, and we come to you every Friday to discuss the content of our weekly wrap-up post, which is entitled Another Week Ends. This week's Another Week Ends is written and put together by none other than the man himself, the founder and director of Mockingbird, David Zoll. Once again, it's that time of the week where I virtually connect with David Zoll. We're two states away from each other and yet in one state of mind, looking at Another Week Ends. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I feel like it's been a remarkably good week, which is normally not something I'd say in January. But despite the sad, the 1-2 blow of losing David Bowie and Alan Rickman in a week, I think today someone told me that J.I. Packer announced that he's blind, something like that.
I saw that he's got eye molecular. I forget what the proper term for it is. Yeah, but his sight.
In the midst of all that, I've had a great week. Partly it's as sad as the Bowie thing is, I've sort of jumped into his discography and some of my favorite stuff, and that's been really edifying. And just to go through this, such a rich catalog, and kind of, we talk so much about a low anthropology, to really see what David Bowie did and accomplished in his life. To me, it's sort of the opposite of that. It's almost like it's encouraging about the human race, which at the outset of 2016, maybe we need.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about anthropology is I think about this, and I guess for the uninitiated, we mean kind of like we're not Jane Goodall things, but like looking at, I don't know, Aborigine groups or something, but like how we estimate human being. And I think there's a sense in which you can have this, on one level, view of the world that's, creation run amok, and be realistic, but yet also be open to Christ playing in 1,000 places. So there's kind of these high moments of anthropology that are graced moments, as opposed to a kind of high anthropology that is based on self-righteousness or addiction to the law, as opposed to like an awe-filled anthropology at how grace can sort of play us like a flute.
Yeah, and in any time and in any place, and so it's unexpected. I don't know. People get worried about pantheism, but it's there when you get hit in your blind spot by some accomplishment or some just picture of beauty that you get to see that is worked through a human being. I mean, those are Woody Allen in Manhattan at the end. He always sort of talks about that's what makes life worth living, and that is not what makes life worth living. But it is not. It doesn't hurt. It's nice, right?
Yeah, when you really see, it's like when the veil, the curtains get pulled back, and you sort of, it's like these transfiguration-like moments where human beings animated by love and freedom actually are icons of their creator.
Yeah, I got interviewed about Bowie on some place based on the thing we posted from Mess of Help, and I thought it was a nice interview. But it sort of started out. It was a Christian radio station in Detroit, and really good guy as a host. I'd never met him before, but they just responded to the blog post. And clearly there was a lot of hand-wringing about the possibility that David Bowie might be in heaven. And I thought to myself, why would there be hand wringing about that? Wouldn't we hope that would be the case, and at least look for signs of some kind of comforting outlook in his music, especially towards the later years. Uh, I mean, I kind of get where he's coming from, is because we occasionally get these comments on Mockingbird where people they roll their eyes a little bit, and probably with good reason. Oh, are you really going to find the gospel and this and that, or you're going to refuse to see anything good in Thomas Kincaid, but you're going to like look at Bowie, and Bowie is sort of like the paragon of '70s decadence, or self-indulgence, and you're going to talk about the gospel there. And I understand that, but I also think it's I think there probably is some good stuff about Thomas Kincaid's paintings, by the way, and I don't want to wade into that really. But the Bowie thing, um, he's just a human being like anyone else, so he's going to deal with the larger questions at some point, and he actually did them quite publicly, and I found it to be very compelling. The fact that we would have to proclaim him off limits for being popular or something he did in his past, it just strikes me deeply unchristian.
Yeah, I remember once with a group of sort of socialites on the Philadelphia Main Line after a talk. It was a talk at a church, and we were having cocktails afterwards. And somebody said something about hearing the Dalai Lama. And they said, come on, could the Dalai Lama really not be in heaven? It was interesting. I said, that sounds gracious, but really what you're saying is just like, well, good little boys and good little girls go to heaven, and we consider him a good one. I was like, it would be really interesting to say, can you imagine if God couldn't forgive Charles Manson? That's why I actually said that, and everybody looked at me like I had a third eye. But I think it's Miroslav.
What if Mel Gibson is in heaven?
Exactly.
What if someone like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Miroslav Volf who I first heard say, "I'm not a universalist, but I hope God is."
Yeah, like a hopeful. You want that to be true. You can't. It doesn't really square with scripture, necessarily. But I just the stance of the heart. It's the position of the heart. Is it sort of? Is there like a gleeful? Oh, I'm so glad that these people who don't believe what I believe are suffering. Or would you hope that the grace of God might be larger than you can imagine? And I understand why. I understand why that makes some people uneasy, and it can be used to justify things, just like anything can be used to justify things. But yeah, that's how Robert Capon always talked about universalism. People always accuse him of being a universalist. He said, "No, I'm not a universalist based on my reading of Scripture. There's just too much talk of hell. However, I hope and I pray that there are, that heaven is empty, that hell is empty. That would be. I'm not willing to sort of tell you who's there and who's not, and I like that. I'm willing to say I don't know that God is gracious, and but there's something about. I can't believe we've already gotten into hell and damnation, Scott.
It's Friday. That's what Fridays are for. Fun Time Friday.
Yeah, Fun Times Friday. There we go. Let's talk
But
about
it's almost like people. It's almost like people are saying, well, if everybody has a BMW, what does mine mean?
Yeah. If everyone's special, then no one is, Scott.
Exactly. What's your favorite Bowie song?
My favorite Bowie song. It always changes. I came to Bowie through his later stuff. When I was living in Europe in the early '90s, Black Tie White Noise came out, and it's not a good Bowie record. As far as Bowie records go, it's pretty bad, actually. But it's got a song called Jump, They Say on it, which I just love to this day. Maybe it conjures up that time in my life. I love that song. I love, I love Life on Mars, and I love everything on Ziggy Stardust. But the stuff I kind of go back to, the album I go back to the most is Station to Station, just because it's so dense and kind of impenetrable and cool sounding. But I really do like some of the '90s stuff that I've written about. I find it "Pretty Things Are Going to Hell" is a rock and roll song. His song called "Slip Away" is great. I like the song. called Baby Universal, which is off the second Tin Machine record. That people hate Tin Machine. They took it as a personal affront. That David Bowie was in this band called Tin Machine at the early '90s, which was really just him working out his love of the Pixies. And it kind of got him back into his art in a new way. But that particular song, Baby Universal, is the best thing that band recorded. I love the song Strangers When We Meet. I mean, I could go on and on. I really love David Bowie. I think the last playlist I put the song Drive-In Saturday, which is, is there a better song than that? I don't know. It's a great, great song.
Well, let's go from David Bowie to David Brooks. Yet again, in another Weekends, a little bit of a spot on the great New York Times columnist.
Yeah, we can't get away from this guy. And, we did try to get him to come speak in New York this year, the ongoing saga of our New York speakers. And we have quite a few great ones that are coming. But this year, for whatever reason, there have been a lot of scheduling issues with people. And Brooks, costs more money than we could ever justify. But every time I think, I've sort of heard what David Brooks has to say. I like him, but I have a conflicted relationship with him. Then he comes out with that thing about Ted Cruz, and which people consider him to be very conservative politically, and here he is criticizing the conservative candidate. But what struck me this week was this interview he did with Comment Magazine, which I believe is sort of like a journal of Jewish thought. And they interview him about his transformation, about the evolution, about how he's become kind of this moral voice in America. And he really rises to the occasion and talks about his faith. He talks about Christianity. He talks about Judaism. Did you read that interview, Scott?
Yeah, I looked it over. I thought one of the things that I really liked about it was what he said about neuroscience.
Oh, yeah.
How, because I loved his book, The Social Animal. I read it a few years ago, and it was really, I still go back to it. I really enjoyed it. And in there, he talks about how science seldom creates new philosophies, but that in general, it enfranchises or dethrones old ones. And he said the best college course he ever took was about the British and French Enlightenment. And his study of neuroscience kind of told him that the British Enlightenment were right and the French were wrong. That you can't just remake humanity. You can like evolve with traditions, and things like psychology and sentiment are incredibly important. And there's recurring things about it. So I think he's right. Like neuroscience, he has that great quote. He says, I don't think neuroscience has taught us anything that George Eliot didn't already know. It doesn't solve all the problems of meaning. So I felt like I had to go back to the Solovycheks or the Niebers or George Eliot or Dostoevsky, who didn't have fMRI machines, but were pretty good observers of human nature. I love that line.
Oh, isn't that amazing? It's a great sort of bon mot too. And when I look back in the Mockingbird archives, I'm always looking for these posts that we can do on Monday afternoons from the archives, which are sort of space fillers while we get our content together for the rest of the week. But there's a lot of cool stuff in there. And I do notice that we did do a lot of neuroscience, especially when Jonah Lehrer was coming out with something new every week. And there was, I guess, about 5 years ago, everything was about neuroscience or social science. And this was going to teach us everything about who we are and give us the meaning of life. And after a while, you started to notice that every 6 months there was a new neuroscience finding that would support the opposite of what the one 6 months before that did. So it seemed like people were able to cherry pick from neuroscience and social science the exact same way they cherry pick from everything else. So it was no more trustworthy. It doesn't mean it wasn't important or didn't have some grounding, but it's no more trustworthy. And so I've watched us as we don't really write about that as nearly as much as we used to.
I think the neuroscience stuff, it does a decent job at being descriptive, but then when it tries to move to being prescriptive, it rings hollow, I think, most of the time.
Yeah. And one thing I'm going to write about this week, or I'd like to, there's a major article in the cover of the New York Times Magazine about happiness, about applied rationality, which is basically trying to take neuroscientific and social scientific breakthroughs and apply them in sort of a happiness course that people can take, and it's a lot of like Silicon Valley people taking this course. It's really interesting because it's gone down that road, that applied rationality. I mean, even the term kind of gives you the willies, right? 'Cause
Can you tell me where to find the information for that course so I can make sure never to sign up for it?
well, actually, I signed you up as a late Christmas present, Scott. It's like don't you love it when people give you Christmas presents that are just uh, passive aggressive commentaries on your character?
Yeah, that is annoying.
Yeah, I think you could really use this applied rationality.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very, very much. And one last thing to highlight as people are looking for things to read on Saturday morning as they're opening their tablets, making their coffee or their chai tea or whatever it is that they're consuming to wake up, you have a little piece in here about how basically doctrines and theological commitments can be idols and manifest themselves even as addictions.
Yeah.
When doctrine becomes idolatry.
When Donovan Riley wrote this for the Christ Hold Fast website, which I'm speaking at their conference in a couple weeks. But I was floored by this column. He talks about being a drug addict, and then sort of once he got sober, he became an exercise addict. And all these moved from sort of addiction to addiction, and then he gets his PhD, and he slowly but surely finds himself using theology to fend off God. Right doctrine. You can have the right answer so that you never have to deal with sort of yourself or any kind of any kind of sense that you might not be able to construct every answer on your own. So it's like using God as a defense against God, using God's words as a defense against God. And this is something you see, and we've seen, and I'm sure we've been very guilty of in the past. But that kind of uncharitable, overly hyper. I wouldn't call it doctrinal because there's nothing wrong with doctrine. He goes to great lengths to say that it's more of a psychology that lies underneath it, and that's what is so interesting, that you can use right doctrine, good doctrine, as a way of actually staving off what the doctrine is describing. I find it to be very compelling, and I find it to be very true in practice. The old Adam can use anything to justify itself, including descriptions of the difference between the old and new Adam. Is that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Frank Lake, the great Frank Lake, the psychiatrist who died in the early 80s, but he wrote in his massive tome, Clinical Theology, he wrote about how schizoid theologians, and by schizoid he means what we would call it now is people that had early childhood trauma, and it really split them off of themselves. They generally they always are flirting with heresy, and he thought it in large part is because the time they were safest was when they were in the womb, and they never made the I thou interpersonal connections. So they're always writing, the Gnostics and abstract theologians are always writing a ground of being or eternal ocean, because they never felt seen. The sort of one-way love, unconditional thing that we all need as kids, it doesn't function for them. So they're always flirting with detached intellectualism and things like this, as opposed to sort of it's a great passage from Clinical Theology. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I think I buy that. I buy that. Every time, Scott, you mention Frank Lake, and I just want to read that book, I guess, but it's so daunting. You pick that thing up, and it's like a doorstop.
Let me tell you, the best parts of it are the exegetical reflections. He has his section on the Syrophoenician woman is the best thing I've ever read in the text. The woman that comes to Jesus and wants healing for her daughter that's afflicted, and Jesus says, wait first for the, is it right to take the scraps and give it to the dogs? And Lake has about a 3-page reflection on that passage. It's better than any biblical commentator I've ever read.
Wow. Yeah, man. I maybe you could just send me that excerpt. I'll find the page numbers.
And the book is so big that if you just carry it around in your backpack, it's like a core back workout. Like you lug it around, like your posture gets better. You'll get washboard abs. It's great.
And we know it's like applying rationality to your abs.
Exactly. But more fun or functional or something. So, David, one thing we also wanted to mention, I wanted to highlight a piece you wrote called "The God of Tidying Up Hates Me." There's nothing like a post entitled "God Hates Me."
Yeah, I didn't mean to be. I wrote it, and then I was like, "This is a little bit inaccessible towards the beginning, so I better give it like a clickbaity title." And then, yeah, so that's what I was thinking. I'm not sure it's that accurate, or it didn't really even work to get people that interested in it. But I was proud of it, so I wanted people to read it.
I'm interested. I'm a person. I'm people.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, what do you say?
The premise you start off is you're looking at a little bit of Rodney Stark stuff and looking at secularity and emerging trends in religious practice, and the alleged lack thereof, right?
Yeah, it's really funny that book. I think it's called The Triumph of Faith, or Why the World's More Religious Than Ever. It really gets at a fundamental, you know, conviction of something that lies behind all of what we're trying to do with Mockingbird, is that everyone's religious. And he says in that book is that, maybe church attendance on the continent has gone down, and there's lots of empty churches in, the northeast of, America as well. But belief in, like, sincere belief in, leprechauns and fortune telling and telepathy have gone up. I mean, I think he says that half of Swedish people polled claimed they believe in mental telepathy, and I don't get the sense that half of the population would trying to be ironic about it. I think they answered truthfully. So, and they like half of Icelandic citizens, and then that's not that many. That's like 2,000 people, but they believe in the Hildu folk, which is like little trolls. So what he was trying to say is that the supernatural is just as much in play, if not more, than ever before. And I was thinking about that as I read an article about Marie Kondo's new book, her the guru of decluttering, Marie Kondo. Do you guys you ever Kondo? Do you know that? You know that book, Scott?
Yeah, I know about it through your review, through your mention of it. I haven't read, and no, I don't condo. I mean, we just bought a house, so we're not condo people. We're single family home people. But
That's funny.
Well, no, I don't. I mean, I try to stay organized, but I don't do it in any kind of deliberate Zen-like feng shui way.
Yeah, she sort of like goes over the top, and I think it's been really freeing for a lot of people who just have tons of paper lying around, never sort of buy way too many clothes, just essentially American upper middle class people who just have too much stuff. She says things very directly in almost like a tiger momish kind of way. She's like, you're an idiot if you have too much of such. There's a lot of value judgments, but they're kind of soft value, or they're harsh value judgments about stuff that's not that personal. So people loved her book, and my wife and I did it because we're pretty messy people, and it helped. We ended up throwing out a huge amount of stuff, none of which we miss. It's like, how many coat hangers do you actually need? That kind of thing.
You need one for every shirt, or
you do.
I mean, that's exactly. There's an exact number. You can actually determine that perfectly.
I know. You need 104. But
what kind of hangers?
Yeah, it was latched onto, and it continues to be latched onto, a huge bestseller and cover of Time magazine, I think. Because of the spiritual nature, or the promises she's making. And Heather Havrilesky, who I think so highly of, she's basically an expert at pointing out secular religions. And if Europe has their fortune tellers and stuff. Well, we have Marie Kondo and this decluttering religion that is that goes beyond what just about decluttering. People make it into a lifestyle that is actually completely integrated, and it's about cleaning up your outside that cleans up your inside. I mean, it's directly contradictory to Christ's ethic about the heart, but people love it because it is such an endorsement of personal control, in almost like a very zealous, maniacal way.
Well, there's nothing like zealous and maniacal self-help, self-ordering religion. I mean, it really it warms the cockles of one's heart.
Yeah, well, I guess, and yeah, I'm not going to run with that, but she's got some good advice. I'm like a lot of these things. There's a lot of really good things in there. Like I think I said in the article that as far as secular religions go, this one's pretty harmless. But Havrilesky seems to she dials in on the irony that Marie Kondo has just written another book, and apparently she's got like a journal coming out and a third book coming out eventually. So eventually she's going to be one of the things that you need to condo out of your life, like her the stuff you've bought. So it's impossible. If she wrote one book that was 20 pages long and then went away for the rest of the life, then there'd be some kind of integrity to this system. But
and it's funny how evangelist like Howard Stern is a big GTD guy, the getting things done. So anytime he has a success with it, right? He comes in like that Monday morning and just berates his staff. Like, Gary, why aren't you more organized? Look at you with all these notes. Like, Robin, I told you need to get organized. Like, he's such a zealous evangelist for it and a judgmental one.
It's amazing how quickly the turn, because it's something that's so soft like this, it does become an avenue for self-righteousness and guilt. Really, it's not even so self-righteousness so much as guilt. I mean, anyone who's messy, who struggles with organization, usually feels terribly guilty about it, and condoing will give you some momentary relief, and it gave me some momentary relief. But of course, we're right back to where we started, and
you're just running around buying hangers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, gosh, you collect hangers so quickly. So I just thought Havrilesky's so funny about all this stuff. She's the one. She's like, when everyone was talking about authenticity, she's like, well, hold the phone. What are we promising people in authenticity, and how have we immediately made authenticity into something that's inauthentic? Or she's the one who wrote about play and how when you mandate play, it's no longer play. She's got this antenna up for I guess subversions of cultural ideals, which quickly become they tap into some kind of secular religiosity, which she's a genius at it, and I find it to be very, very entertaining, amusing, but also convicting for me personally.
Well, I'd encourage everybody, in addition to looking at Another Weekends, like maybe first read this piece, because as you're waking up, tomorrow morning with your coffee or whatever, and you're tempted to sort of condoize, maybe you could just like lay in bed and drink coffee, read.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than a Saturday that's the entire Saturday is spent organizing your house. I mean,
no, there's some things worse, like waterboarding.
Yeah, there's something
worse, but like,
yes, you're right.
There are some, but you're right. It's a drag.
You lose your entire weekend's gone, and you've just reorganized your kitchen shelves.
Anyway. Well, thanks, man.
Thanks for letting me sound off, Scott. You're the best.
Well, all right, David, thanks. And, there's lots of other great stuff in Another Weekends this week. So as the week is ending, I'd encourage all of our listeners, head on over to mbird.com and check out this lovely post with just chock full of interesting stuff.
Some good friends when you let me out.
Thanks again for listening. And if you liked this episode and have been a fan of the podcast, please drop into iTunes and give us a rating and a review. And just a reminder that all of our content that we talked about can be found on our website, mbird.com. Thanks again for listening. Catch you next week.